Hello, I'm Pete Lewis, Mayor of Auburn, and I'm here today over at our police station at Justice Center with Assistant Police Chief Larry Miller. And before we start, Chief, there sure are a lot of pretty black and white cars. You know, that was the idea from our police chief, and it was the point of making sure that everybody knew that we were back out in the neighborhoods. And I have had so many calls about how people like those black and whites back. Be sure to pass that on to the chief for me, would you?
I'll do that, sir.
Okay, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about false alarms.
Yes, sir.
And that's been a problem in the city. Just how big a problem has it been?
The police department receives about 2,500 calls each year from alarm companies to respond to both residential and commercial alarms. And unfortunately, about 95% or over that 2,500 are actually false alarms.
That's incredible. So I know that Council, Municipal Services Committee, Councilmember Serino has been doing quite a bit of work on that. What's come out of all that?
Yes, sir. We asked the Community Services Committee to help us look at the problem and how we can reduce false alarms. We noticed that other cities and municipalities that instituted a model false alarm ordinance were able to reduce their false alarm calls by as much as 70%. And so in January of this year, the City Council enacted a new false alarm ordinance, a very comprehensive ordinance that is structured to do just that, reduce those false alarms for us.
And how much time do you think that takes up of our police?
Oh, a considerable amount of time, sir. We estimated that over the actual cost to the city of Auburn was in excess of $500,000 a year just responding to false alarm calls.
Oh my, so this could make a difference. And you said what percent, 70%?
As much as 70% reduction, yes, sir.
So that's $350,000?
Yes, sir.
That's a goodly sum.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So how does this work now? I understand that we brought in an outside agency who contracted out some of the service so that our police officers don't have to be involved, but how does that work?
The ordinance allowed us to contract with a third-party administrator, in this particular case, Public Safety Corporation, and they will manage the false alarm ordinance for us. They will be contacting all of the alarm companies that do business in the city of Auburn. They'll be establishing lists with these particular companies to ensure that all of the companies are registered and that they've received the subscriber list from all the false alarm companies in the city. They will be requiring the companies to follow the ordinance insofar as billing an annual registration fee of $24 per alarm user in the city, and then assessing any fines associated with the ordinance.
I'm Larry Miller, Assistant Chief for Support Services with the Auburn Police Department. I want to thank you for coming out today. Can I see a show of hands of those that are familiar with working with the Pierce County ordinance? Okay, well then this is not going to be anything startlingly new for you. It's our particular ordinance is very, very similar with one or two minor exceptions, I think, to what Pierce County has right now. Let me give you just a little bit of background here. Auburn, the Auburn Police has always prided itself on being an agency that if you need us, we will be there. We come when we're called. But we've noticed over the years, in the past few years, we're realizing about 2,500 calls each year to the dispatch center to dispatch police for alarms. And out of that 2,500, 99% of those, the national average is 98%. Here in Auburn is 99% of those alarms are false. Many of them are handled by local security companies, such as the Super Mall. We get a lot of alarms, commercial alarms out at our Super Mall there, and the local security will handle those, and they're typically false alarms as well. But we found that Auburn Police in the last couple of years average responding to over 1,800 of those. Typical burglar alarms in our city require a 2-unit response. We, for officer safety, will send 2 units of those. And then for hold-up alarms, panic alarms at businesses, that will necessitate 4 or more cars to set up a perimeter. So it is a big draw on resources. We did an accounting of just exactly what that looked like for us. and it resulted in a gross loss in terms of response calls for service of over $500,000 a year for the Auburn Police to respond to these false alarms. We were recovering about $35,000 under our old ordinance. The old ordinance called for a one-time registration of alarms and a $57 fine for false alarms after the third false alarms in the course of a 12-month period. That particular ordinance was supposed to be the model ordinance that was going to reduce our false alarms, and it just flat did not do that. I was tasked by our chief of police to take a look at what we could do to reduce the number of false alarms that we were responding to. And there were essentially two options: adopt a much more stringent ordinance or go to a verified response scenario. And we knew a number of agencies in the area were supporting a verified response. Now, I told you at the onset here that Auburn Police has really prided itself in being an organization that serves the public. And we know that people install alarm systems in their home or in their business because they expect if that alarm goes off, somebody's going to come and check that out. And we definitely want to be able to do it, but we don't want to be responding time and time and time again to alarms that are false. Because not only is that dangerous, inherently dangerous to the public and to the officers in responding, but it's a waste of valuable resources. Those officers could be better used responding in a more timely manner to valid calls for service and or proactively policing the community that they're serving out there. So we were looking for an ordinance that would help support that would reduce those calls for services. And what we found is that agencies that have adopted this ordinance, or a very similar ordinance to what we eventually adopted, we were seeing agencies that were experiencing a reduction of 70% in the number of false alarm responses from their officers. What it really does for us is it redistributes the burden of false alarms from the general public, which is where it was before, to the alarm users themselves. And it puts that responsibility back on the alarm users and the alarm companies to ensure that they are using state-of-the-art technologies, the CP01 standards that will help reduce false alarms through technology, and also procedures and policies in place to ensure that the alarm companies are adequately checking with the alarm site before they call the dispatch center in the first place. These are things like enhanced call verification, ensuring that you're calling more than one number before you call 911 dispatch. That's a very, very important aspect of our ordinance here. We find that typically you'll get somebody that will set their alarm. They leave their coffee on the counter in their kitchen. They walk out the door. They go, oh, I forgot. Well, I've got enough time. They run in there and grab it. They're back out the door and on the way to work, and lo and behold, their alarm goes off. Alarm company calls the residence. Nobody answers. They call 911. Well, if you have the enhanced call verification with the second call going to, say, their cell phone, the person says, oh, I just left the residence, my bad. They're turning around and getting that fixed. One of the things that we have adopted in the ordinance, and you see it on television all the time, is that important stay feature, where somebody's at home, mom is at home working out by herself, and somebody kicks in the front door, the alarm goes off. We're not requiring a sequential verification on something like that. If you got a residential burglar alarm set up in that stay feature, it doesn't require the sequential verification, just that one-time activation, and you can ask 911 for a dispatch to that type of scenario. We're trying to be accommodating to you and to the public as much as possible without creating or continuing this adverse impact on the agency and the city. Our ordinance provides for an educational period through January 20th of 2010, which will allow any residence or business that incurs their first false alarm to receive a warning
and not a fine. However, after January 20th of 2010, all alarms will be subject to a fine of either $100 for a burglary alarm for either residential or business, or a $200 fine for a panic, hold-up, or robbery alarm. Our ordinance calls for an annual registration for all alarm holders. The annual registration fee is $24. However, if you are a senior or disabled, you may qualify for a reduced $12 annual registration fee. Typically, these fees will be collected by your alarm company. In an effort to reduce false alarms in the city, our ordinance also calls for the suspension of sites that have repeat false alarms. If an alarm site has 3 or more false alarms within a 12-month period, that site will be subject to suspension. In order to be reinstated, the alarm holder would have to complete the educational training program provided through Public Safety Corporation in the city and apply for reinstatement with a reinstatement fee. The ordinance also provides an appeal process for anyone that has been fined through our false alarm ordinance. Our false alarm ordinance website provides the steps necessary to file an appeal. The site also provides what constitutes an appealable action.
So, first of all, we're going to hire an outside agency. They're going to make sure that all the alarm companies operate in the same way.
Correct.
So there's consistency. There's a fee to pay for this, which will cut down on anybody's past fees. And then there's an enforcement part of this in violations if they keep on costing all of our citizens so much money.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Because that sounds like an awful lot to me, like there's a few areas, citizens and businesses, that are costing all the citizens $500,000 a year of taxpayer money.
Yes, absolutely. Roughly 5% of the businesses and alarms in this in the city is impacting the entire city's revenue source.
Wow.
And this particular ordinance will put the burden back on the alarm users themselves.
Which is where it was intended to be at the beginning.
Yes, sir.
And I know that our volunteer police force has tried to help with this, that we've had our police officers and other folks, including the Homeowners Association, trying to help. But the amount of these false alarms is simply just overwhelming the system, so that when the 911 call comes in from somebody who's in need of help right now, they could be off checking a false alarm.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, sir. The benefit in reducing these false alarm calls will be it will free up those officers to respond to valid calls for service and or to use their time proactively. Additionally, when we have calls to like bank alarms, hold-up alarms, it necessitates sending 3, 4, or 5 cars running with their emergency lights and sirens on through the city. And this increases the risk to the public at large as well as to the officers responding to these alarms, which, as I stated earlier, by and large, false alarms.
And I know when I used to work at the bank, if you set up a false alarm, in the first place, you knew there was going to be somebody standing outside the door with a shotgun. Something you didn't want to see, because
Yes,
they
sir.
always say, and please step outside the door. But secondly, there was also a part of that you knew that you wanted those people really on their highest alert if there was a real emergency. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here as well.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, unfortunately, when there's so many calls that come in of these false alarms, could you honestly expect that they could keep that highest degree of concern when over and over the alarms are false? This gives us a system to keep the cost down to the taxpayers, to ensure that when an alarm is sounded, that the proper people are there, and they're there with all possible speed. It's good for us, it's good for the taxpayers, and it's even good for the citizens who have the alarms. We hope that as this system goes along, we can start to see the improvements that will help all of us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Chief, I appreciate you being here with us. And if you have ideas, if you have suggestions for things you'd like to see, please do call me. Call my office at 931-3041. Have a great day.